Nicholas Fuentes. How are you, sir?
I'm good. How are you doing?
Doing good. Thank you very much for doing this. Thank you for traveling to do this. I really appreciate it. I've wanted to do this for a while. I felt like this was a show that was supposed to happen.
And we both are from the Israel critical side and always have been, and kind of representing different factions, I think.
Yeah.
Because you, obviously, your stories, you were the Ron Paul revolution guy, libertarian, and you come at it from the perspective of the wars, that the neocons are pro-Israel and they're driving the foreign conflict. And I come at it from the far-right Trump revolution. So it's like a generational thing. It's an ideological thing. And I'm also Catholic. You're obviously Jewish. So there's a religious element, an ideological element. And it's interesting how in this moment when everyone is talking about these issues, we kind of represent maybe two different sides of that, or like a nuanced difference in the Israel critical side. So it is, I said yes because I think it's going to be just a really great conversation. I think that you're super intelligent, know the relevant facts. So do I. We have some disagreements, but I think we agree on far more than we disagree about. But yeah, so I really just thought it'd be an excellent conversation.
When I started thinking about it was when Jordan Peterson went on the Joe Rogan Experience, I believe the last time he was on. And it was a couple days after I had debated Douglas Murray. My first thought was like, Jordan Peterson should, if he's going to say that, he should sit down with Nick Fuentes. And then I was like, you know what? I should sit down with Nick. Like, it's been a while. And then it was something I just kind of kept thinking about.
Yeah. Well, in that debate, I think raised a lot of interesting questions, because it is the thing of the moment, which is that there's been this explosion of inquiry and conversation about Israel, about the Jews, conspiracy surrounding that, the nature of it. The big question I always get asked on my show is like, what is it? What is this thing that's going on? And the reason that this is happening is because the taboo has gone away. There's a few things. There's simultaneously the censorship around the topic has dissipated, and then I think right after the taboo went away, largely because of the war in Gaza. I think people are so outraged it kind of blew the lid on that. And now that kind of is the central question of the role that these personalities play in mediating that. Because I think there's, at this point, a recognition by everybody on the whole planet. There's no denial anymore. Nobody can avoid it. Even Netanyahu's doing damage control with Shapiro. I think that was yesterday. That everybody is talking about this. Everyone's furious. Everyone does not have that conventional pro-Israel thing anymore. And now I feel like there are people like a Peterson or a Shapiro or even a Charlie Kirk, which I'm sure we'll get into, that are trying to they recognize that the reality has already changed.
Yeah.
But they are in denial in a sense, trying to negotiate like what that's going to look like. Because they recognize the old consensus is gone, not coming back. People are not going to be pro-Israel like they were. The genie's not going back in the lamp, the proverbial lamp. But they also recognize that, is there a limiting principle to the conversation? Is there something outside the Overton window? And if you've lost all your credibility, how can you now step in and say, okay, we were lying before, but now go no further? Right. And I think it's an open question where it goes from here that everybody's asking.
It was like with all these guys, with Sam Harris and Jordan Peterson and Ben Shapiro, your whole calling card was, we have these conversations. We don't shut voices out. You have to win the argument. We're against cancel culture.
Right. Well, and no one's really on their side on that, because Douglas Murray, when he said, well, have you been to Gaza and all these other types, the appeal to authority, it's like, in a way, this is just another chapter and kind of like a larger saga that goes back to COVID, Ukraine, Trump even, which is that, we're led to believe that these institutions they have the authority to tell us what's going on and what to think and what's acceptable. And we know that they lied about all that, lied about the facts, the opinions. They were probably not even in good faith. And now they want to come out and tell us, well, but like you said, we can't have that conversation, or Daryl Cooper's too far, or they're doing the same thing to him that they did to you, where they said, well, you're not a historian. And it's like, okay, well, neither is really anybody. Does anybody have the right to critically think, or to read books or to offer an opinion? Or are we literally just going to be told this is what you're allowed to think because, we're the experts?
Well, it's like, what? Maybe you should take that. Maybe it's really important. I thought you're supposed to speak up for the voiceless and get all emotional and all that. Like, where did all that shit go? All of a sudden, there's one thing that's like a subject you're not allowed to talk about. And I just think that's bullshit.
Yeah, well, and Jordan, he even took it a step further. I don't know if you saw his tweets about me, but he called me a rat. He said, Nick Fuentes is a rat. And then he came back and amended it and said, no, wait, he's not a rat because rats are odious by their nature. He said, Nick chooses to be a rat. He's lower than rat. And it's like... And by the way, isn't his whole thing like about totalitarianism and like dehumanizing people? And I said to him, I really was more just like astounded, like you said, because he is different than the others. That's like, he's always been different. Shapiro's like an insane Zionist, like operative of Israel, whatever you want to say. But Peterson, like you said, he really was very influential for young men. And I know that because I was one of them at one point, and I had close friends that loved his Bible lecture series, his podcast, Maps of Meaning, which was his original book.
Pulled a lot of young kids away from atheism.
Major, and towards Christianity and towards conservatism and all of it. And you're right, his claim to fame was that he was supposed to be this like lodestar for the disaffected young men of the Trump generation. And who represents that more than me? I'm kind of like that archetypal guy leading those people. And I agree, if he's got some issue with me, first of all, why not just call me out? It's this weird like thing that the left does where they say, we don't want to platform him. We don't want to give him attention. But like you say, what then happened to that whole deal where it's like, it's a free marketplace. We have to just talk or else we'll fight. We have to, have this marketplace. So there's just layers of hypocrisy and no one's buying. Nobody's buying into that nonsense. And it's sad because I think he lost a lot of credibility by doing that.
I completely agree. And I agree it's sad. And I think, and I'm not saying this again to pick on Jordan Peterson. It's just like, I think he's an important figure. It's an important topic. And it's kind of hard for people to hate someone who's cool to them. And it's just so weird to me that everybody else's opinion is like, no, this is the one thing that's unacceptable, bigotry. Anything, the government just passed a law that says they can detain you without charges, whatever. But like, no one's being a bigot about it, right? They're doing it to whites and blacks equally. Like, okay. And then number two, like, what is this thing that we ought to shut people out of the conversation? It just seems so counterproductive and stupid.
Well, and it's not even just bigotry. In particular, it's words. It's not like you even have to do a bigoted thing like you beat up a black person for being black or you discriminate actively. It's like if you have said something that sounds racist, is racist, that is worse than murder, war, etc. And that was kind of like a phenomenon this summer because I was so outspoken against the war in Gaza and the clips were going around on TikTok and Instagram. And a lot of liberals are saying, wait a second, even he is saying this is evil. This is a guy we're supposed to hate. Maybe the broken clock is right twice a day. And I was on my show reminding people like, maybe I'm racist. Maybe we disagree on issues of race, but I'm against murder. I'm against genocide. And like you said, is that not the actual moral paradigm? Is like killing, war, famine, are these things not the real evils? And maybe bigotry is somewhere further away from that and saying things that might be bigoted further even still from that. And we live in a society now where it seems like if you have ever uttered anything that's bad, it haunts you.
Yeah.
It's like you look at my Wikipedia page and it's like he's a racist, sexist, homophobe, Islamophobe. In 2018, he said this. In 2020, he said that. Right. And I go on shows and in the news reports, they list like things I have said. It's like I do a talk show. Yeah. I talk 3 hours a day for a living for 10 years. And sometimes it sounds controversial or provocative or offensive, but doesn't that kind of go with the territory of freedom of conscience? If we can think, should we not be able to speak? And if we speak, can we not be wrong? Can we not be funny? Can we not be insensitive or bombastic? And I guess this gets to something about because you think, well, society shouldn't be this way. But why is it this way? People are hanged by their words selectively. This is like, these are tools of reputational destruction. They don't like where you're pointed, so then they look for things that are going to hurt people's feelings and say, oh, well, you shouldn't listen to this guy because he said this, and I bet you don't like how that sounds, huh? Because when you look at, I brought this up on PBD, Ben Shapiro in the year 2000, I think, wrote an article about ethnic cleansing. It said transfer is not a dirty word. Yep. And he's arguing for literal ethnic cleansing. Now, I have never argued anything close to that. I've never made the argument that we should ethnically cleanse blacks from the United States. But if I did, I'd be hanged by that forever. Yeah. Is Shapiro. Why and why not? He is not reminded of that every time he goes around, not because he apologized for it 20 years later, but because he has all the correct opinions. He's 100%. Not a target. He's got backing. And so that kind of tells us that, and by the way, the same applies to all other kinds of scandals. If we want to have an open society, and that's ironic coming from me, but we do need
libertarian Nick Fuentes.
Yeah, sort of. It's like you do need some level of tolerance, actually, to inoculate yourself from using reputational destruction for political control, because that's what I've come to realize about it.
Dude, you're 100% right. They're like, hey, the people never asked for this, but we're transforming your society anyway, but we're going to be really cool about it. They didn't even throw that last one in there. They went, you didn't ask for this, it's happening anyway, and fuck you, and everything you hold dear. And also, your son's a girl. Like, it's like on every level. And I think that was guaranteed to create a pushback. And I think it's crazy to not engage with that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I agree. That's how I interpreted the Trump revolution. When I was 18 and Trump won the election, and by we, I mean me and my followers at the time, or whoever I considered a fellow traveler, we viewed the Trump revolution as an implicit white identitarian movement. And that is what was loaded behind every slogan. Make America great again. Okay, when was America great? Was it great 15 years ago, or are you talking about like the 80s? And what was America like in the 80s? You know, it was a different color, was a different flavor. We're going to say Merry Christmas again. Okay, what does that mean? Who doesn't say Merry Christmas? Liberals and all these people that practice different religions, Muslims and Jews for that matter, although Trump was always pro-Israel. And we saw Trump as basically just an implicit expression of that, and over time would become more explicit as the changes became sort of ignorable, the demographic changes, the cultural changes. And I do agree with your point, because as someone like myself, these were the conversations I was having, as maybe like a higher IQ. Obviously, I'm not just like a resentful, angry white man who doesn't like change. I was looking at this and saying, like you said before, it's not maybe desirable that America changes. You recognize this is in progress. It is happening. It, in some sense, has happened. And as maybe a young person, though, and being precocious and also impulsive and immature, I was trying to find the vocabulary and language to talk about these things. And I was interested in opinions on this. And I did talk to people at the time who were willing to engage with me. They were few and far between. And they would say, is it really practical, an ethno-state? You know, and clearly there's going to be diversity, but how are we going to live with that? How can we preserve some semblance of our way of life? And I feel like if there was more of a recognition that we deserve that we deserve engagement, a conversation, recognition, you know, that our grievances are valid, that it's okay to not be okay with the things that are happening, maybe the movement would have taken a different direction, or maybe it wouldn't be so much rage and conflict and division. But it's like you said, people were told, this is the way it's going to be. Your neighborhood is destroyed. It's irreversibly changed. If you have a problem with that, it's because you're a bad person. If that makes you angry, we're just going to take away your voice. And if you riot, then we're just going to throw you in jail and ruin your life. And it was just kind of like, I said this on my show, doubling down, always doubling down, ignoring intolerance. I know that's like trite at this point, but ironically, you know, the proponents of tolerance were intolerant of anyone that wasn't on board and anyone that didn't look like the new American they wanted to make. And I think that in some sense, maybe my ascendancy in the past couple of years as well, and this is accompanied by and maybe caused it, the Overton window moving to the right on everything, on race, on Israel, on crime, on immigration. Now that people are kind of like banging on the door of the liberal elite saying like, get out, now they're willing to have the conversation. Now they're saying, all right. Okay, maybe we could talk about turning some of this stuff back. And I've said on my show, I just hope this is the moment when there's introspection and we do talk and we find a resolution, because my fear is that we blow right past that and the worst elements with the worst impulses, because they are vindicated in some sense, are going to take control of this, and it is going to be a lot of populist anger, real resentment, real rage, real hatred, cruelty, because I think that's a distinct possibility.
Yeah, I'm glad you say that, and I completely agree with you. And I think it's a moment that there should be introspection for everybody, like myself included. Mm-hmm. The 1960, we can't go back to 1965 and undo the Immigration Act. And this is going to be a multiracial society of some sort. And we ought to think about like, okay, how do we move forward in a way that's conducive to peace and prosperity, which is kind of what we all on some level want.
Yeah, it's a difficult question, because I guess it comes down to multiracialism itself, because we do live in different America. There was, I'm told, the consensus in the 90s and the early noughts where people describe race relations as generally good. And, we could talk about why that is. I mean, people say that that's only after there was this intense anti-crime intervention, the crime bill and Giuliani and stop and frisk and all that. But people say things were pretty good. But America was also a lot less diverse. And so we've undergone this political transformation. And on the other side of it, we do have a much different America. And the question is, now that we really do have like these large groups of different races in the country, can there be a brand new political order that's based on understanding? And it comes down to the question of that in itself. And to me, all these little things that they were talking about 20 years ago or 10 years ago, representation, microaggressions, opportunity, it's really about power. That's ultimately what it comes down to. It's about who will predominate, who will be preeminent. When you're talking about, for example, DEI, that's saying we want the spots at Harvard because you know who is scouting Harvard talent? The biggest corporations, law firms. And we want to be in the law firms. We want to be on the boards of the biggest companies because we want power.
Right.
And we want power to help ourselves. We want that for Black people. We want that for Hispanics, for Asians. And so it does come down ultimately to power sharing. And power sharing and even wealth sharing, it comes down to the distribution or allocation of resources. It's contentious because whites are necessarily losing power. They used to have all of it, and now they're sharing it. Now they're going to have half of it or a quarter of it. And what's more is if another group has power over you, there's like an inherent suspicion because it's like, well, this guy's not really looking out for me because he doesn't look like me and he didn't come from where I came from and he's not like me. And the problem with this is after there's so much conflict, the non-whites don't trust whites. And the whites are rightly skeptical of the non-whites because the non-whites seem to have license to hate whites. Non-whites have like inherent distrust, basically like a veiled hatred and resentment, and they feel completely able to express that. And so the fundamental question is, how now do the races share power in a way that isn't contentious? How do we find an understanding? And I don't know if that's even possible, because the concern from the alt-right was always, in particular in a democracy, in an open society, when politics gets racialized, it basically just becomes like a race war. Yeah. It turns into like a soft form of a racial war. And, now they're saying woke right. I think the reason they're doing that, and they want to, just kind of get rid of identity politics and find a consensus, is because they want for the whites now not to fight the non-whites. They want a situation where, like you said, we're going to have happy liberal whites, blacks, Hispanics, Asians all living together. I just don't know how possible that is at this point. And that's where people start to talk about, can we disintegrate? We were forcibly integrated with immigration and after the Civil Rights Act. Can we now go our separate ways? I don't know that that's actually even a good thing, though. I don't know that that's even like a good answer. But I would say where it starts is just with honesty. Ultimately, there's got to be a recognition that there are legitimate grievances on both sides, and there are illegitimate grievances.
Right.
There are legitimate voices expressing those grievances that actually, because I said this on the Charlie Kirk show, after Charlie got shot, I think there was a real threat of like war. I think there still is, because left-wingers are shooting people and blowing stuff up, and eventually a right-winger is going to retaliate, and then is it going to be like the 60s and 70s? That's a question. But I said on my show after Charlie died, the important thing is, let's get a new consensus of people that don't want that, that don't want war, that don't want their opponents to die, that don't want to murder each other. I said, I'm Christian. I don't believe in murder. I don't believe in revenge. I said, and not all people are Christian, and not all Christians believe that, actually. And so I think moving forward, there needs to be an uncomfortable coming together of people that have grievances, legitimate grievances with each other, but who both want harmony, want to live in peace, don't want bloodshed, leaders from both sides to come together. But I'm not optimistic. I think that the most cynical, calculating people rise to the top. They will incite and exploit the divisions and try to vie for control. And I think, conflict is more likely than peace at this point.
Yeah, it's very hard. It's very hard to keep those because it's so easy. There are legitimate grievances that black people have. I mean, there is no, and this is my own bias, I guess, but much of it doing with government policy is almost everything that's handed to them from the state is absolute garbage, and their schools are really bad, and there's like legitimate grievances there. I also think like welfare has done enormous damage. But you kind of can't just blame all your problems on white people and racism. I mean, that actually is not really what's holding black people back in this country. And I think we have to be honest about that if we don't want things to go in an ugly direction.
Yeah, well, and I would say that a lot of what occurred under wokeism, I don't think it was all bad necessarily, because I think that, as I get older, I do recognize it's sort of funny. Like when I was a teenager, we were getting called racist for everything. Everything was racist, everything. And I feel like a lot of people started out saying, how's that racist? I remember used to, like you said earlier, if you called them black and not African-American. Right. In like 2012, that was a problem. Or colored instead of person of color, whatever. And he'd say, I don't hate anybody for their race. I feel like people have kind of gone full circle. And now 10 years later, people are like, they actually hate non-white people and go, yeah, I'm racist, so what? And I don't know, I feel like maybe that's a mistake in a sense. I mean, I've said I'm racist, but like actually genuinely harboring racial hatred is bad. I think it's good as a society we move past that. I think it's good as a society we move past a lot of prejudice. And I think I agree that the new consensus just needs to be, just like you said, that basic conception of fairness, equality. And it really comes down to specificity with the language. Like everyone now talks about, are you racist? Are you not racist? I say, yeah, I'm a little racist. I think everyone's a little racist. Yeah, we're all a little prejudiced, and we all believe in stereotypes. And what does that even really mean? But do I believe in cruelty? Hatred, violence? No. And I usually like to use those words because anyone who knows me, the number one racist, knows I'm not a cruel person. I'm not a hateful person. I'm not a violent person. Unless I'm put in a self-defense situation at my front door, let's say, because that is,
forgot about that.
Tends to happen, and I think that as a country, we could survive being racist. We can't survive like ontologically hating each other and not wanting the best for each other and wanting to kill and destroy each other. And that's why I think it's really important. It's like I said after that show, like we are going to need to fight. I do believe there is going to need to be like an intense political battle, and people are going to need to choose what side they're going to be on. And what side I'm not on is the side where someone gets shot in the neck and you celebrate, or someone gets stabbed in the neck with a knife and you make excuses for it, or even in Gaza, people are being blown to smithereens and you say, give them hell, they deserve it, whatever. It's like we need to find a way where, and I'm Christian, of course, but we need to take most of the right and some of the left even against the kind of nihilistic element on the far left, because I really believe they are the problem. I think they are driving a lot of the issues here.
Yeah, well, I think there's a lot of truth to that. The whole point of all of this is that it is an American destruction of Gaza. This isn't Israel doing it. Netanyahu goes around and brags about what Israel can do. Israel can't do shit. Israel can only do things because they have the full backing of the United States of America. So, like, sorry, if you're in the world of talking about these things, you don't get to pass on this one. Like,
right.
You got to have an opinion.
Yeah, I saw that too, and it's become very popular over the past year and a half. I see a lot of the young men, they watch Matt Walsh, they watch this other stuff, and they say, well, yeah, I just don't really care about Israel that much. I care about America. And I saw Matt Walsh say that on Tucker. He said, and you could tell that it is like a rhetorical innovation, because let's be honest, this is an issue that people like Matt Walsh don't want to talk about because he works for Ben Shapiro and he knows, like Candace Owens, if you drift too far in that subject, you lose your job. And he likes having a job. So you get it. Now, this is an extremely contentious issue also, and it's very topical. It's in the news, and he knows the question's coming. Are you pro-Israel? Are you anti-Israel? There's people who feel very strongly about it. And you could tell this is like a rhetorical device. It's a cop-out where you can say, I'm not pro-Israel, but I'm not anti-Israel. I just don't care. And that really pissed me off because it seems like you're feigning ignorance. You're either lying or you're really ignorant. And the reason why is because, be that as it may, that you don't care about Israel, we happen to be supporting their war, and it's actually hurting us. And there's other things too. Obviously, it's a big subject. There's a lot of this stuff going on. And so people say, well, let them kill each other. If you've been paying attention, one side's doing a lot more killing. Yeah. We're paying for it. We are, on the hook for all of it. And, so when they say, well, all that stuff, we don't care about it, whatever, be that as it may, it is going on. And until it stops or changes, we can't stop talking about it. It's like you said, we don't want to be obsessed with it, but if you talk about it, you get canceled. We have to talk about getting canceled. We have to talk about the thing in itself. And when that changes, similar on the same vein, people like Matt Walsh say, well, we should just end all foreign aid. It's like, okay, but they get like all of it. And it's not ending anytime soon. So you could sit there with your arms folded and say, well, I think we should end the foreign aid, but like it's not really a big issue. Well, then you're in favor of the status quo. And that's kind of the whole point, is like, even if you're recusing yourself or you're complacent, if you're doing anything other than actively opposing, you're passively supporting the ongoing status quo. And that needs to be said.
I mean, I think there's like, they don't want to pay the price of being an Israel critic, but I think there's a new price that's going to come from not, taking a stand on this at all.
I totally agree. And I have kind of made that my mission. Like people hate the Groypers because the Groypers swarm on the internet. And
they sure do. They sure do, those bastards.
Even among my good friends who happen to be Jewish. They swarm and they make people upset, and they're applying pressure. And that was something that I did very intentionally in 22. I did my AFPAC 3 conference. We invited Joe Kent, who was running for Congress, and he was America First. He's from the Intel community, anti-war. I think his wife tragically was killed in Syria, and by all appearances seemed to be a good faith critic of the war machine. Well, we invited him to our conference. He didn't show up. And then the next day, even though he wasn't even there, he disavowed me and said, I disavow Nick Fuentes. That's not populism. He said, particularly his views on Israel. And I said, see, that's the problem, because, and this is going on to this day, whether it's Kent, Trump, Biden, Charlie Kirk, if you go against Israel, they make you pay a heavy price. AIPAC is coming in with the berserkers, the ADL's coming in, like, you're going to pay. So what do? Hey, I got to get them off my back. I got to disavow you. I have to sign the letter. It's easier. It's the path of least resistance. I said, we have to create an opposing force and push in the other direction. We need people to know that if you go too in favor of Israel or condemn the Israel critical right, you're going to pay a heavy price too. You're going to get, and we don't have money power, but we got people power. You're going to have somebody in your district asking you about Israel at every stop. You're going to have stickers put up. We're going to make a website. We're going to do this. He lost by 2,000 votes. He lost by like less than 1%. Biggest upset in the midterms. Now, maybe that was us, maybe it wasn't, but you can't know for sure. Now, looking back, would he have made the same remark? Maybe not, because he says it wasn't worth it. And I'm a big believer in, we got to get serious And this was the idea behind Groyper War II. This was the idea behind the, what do they call them in Michigan in the Democratic primary? They voted like no preference.
Yeah.
We need to make it visible and known like, AIPAC has the money, we have the votes. And like you said, we can't budge on that.
Okay, so here's where I would slightly disagree with you. Although I get your point. I certainly get the point about like making there has to be a price tag also for this. But to be completely fair here, you also have painted yourself into this position where you've and look, I'm not like being judgment. First of all, as I said, this is something I think just as a society we're going to have to figure out going forward. Now that everybody's online all the time, people can't be ruined over what they said in their fucking 20s. It's just too crazy. It's too crazy. Everybody says, like, whatever. Anyone interesting has said crazy shit in their fucking 20s. That being said, it's not disavowing you. It's not just the anti-Israel shit. There's also all the Nazi shit on top of it. And I don't mean like you're a Nazi. I mean, okay, a lot of it might be sarcasm. A lot of it is that you kind of are the best at channeling like the energy of like talking shit on an Xbox controller. So like when I was a kid, we didn't have those, you know, you didn't talk on video games, but we talked shit like that. Like I know that energy and I'm fond of it. But I could see where like anybody who's got to get anywhere in politics is like, listen, I have to, like, I can't take all that baggage. So in other words, there is a difference between, say, disavowing just the anti-Israel position and disavowing like all the extra shit on top of that.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I get what you mean, but in that particular case, he went out of his way. Like he wasn't even associated with me. You know, we did happen to be talking privately, but it wasn't known. And my point is that it's this idea that disavowing is cheap. It's the path of least resistance. And maybe that might be a bad example because it's a little contentious. You're right. But to signal allegiance to Israel, it's easier to signal my allegiance because he said in particular, I disavow Nick Fuentes and his views on Israel. If he said he's too extreme, he's a Hitler lover, that would have been one thing because like you said, no politician can be forced to accept baggage like that, trying to win in a purple district.
Right.
But said his views on Israel, an alarm bell went up and I said, no, this won't do. Because, and in particular, the Matt Walsh faction, I'm sure he's a good guy. I don't hate him as a guy. He's Catholic, he's white, he's very conservative. I'm sure he's a nice guy. But he represents a faction of like quietists, where they're going to go with the Israel-controlled right to get where they need to go. And I think that's part, you know, name of the show, it's part of the problem. That's a big part of the problem. There needs to be a faction, sadly, that is dedicated to strictly, explicitly America first. Because like you said, I mean, what even motivated me is that tension where Trump said, no, the new doctrine's America first, not small government conservatism, it's this. And I said, yeah, but there's one glaring exception to that, it seems. And they're trying to tell us, well, forget about it. Except that's the most important exception. That's the exception that proves the rule. So that's why I'm very insistent and militant on the right wing that people kind of make it known where they stand because it's a betrayal.
And so I will concede, number one, I understand where there's a tendency to like kind of blame Jews. I also understand that there's an unfair degree of protection that you get. However, I think you were also very unfair in the way you came at me and saying that the only reason I'm on these shows is because I'm a Jew or something. I mean, it seemed to me, and again, I say this, like, I like you. I've always liked you. I say this, it seemed insane to come at me over that. Is it like your issue you said on Candace was that I didn't deny the Holocaust or something, or that I wasn't willing to question World War II, which I've been pretty famous for defending the biggest questioner of World War II. I think 40% of my interviews are just asking me about Darryl Cooper. And so I guess that I just wonder, like, what was it that you were trying to, like, what was the beef? What was the disagreement?
Well, the beef started, and it was about a year ago, so I don't remember it exactly. But the beef started that, of course, the thing that is happening is that everybody's now permitted to talk about Israel and the Jews. And everybody also knows that, and I know the world doesn't revolve around me, but I famously got, like, martyred for that, in a sense. And I'm not being dramatic. I mean, I lost PayPal, YouTube. I mean, they made it so that I could not have a career, and I couldn't make money, couldn't have a bank account, was part of that. on some level. I mean, that had a lot to do with January 6th, but I mean, being banned from PayPal is a pretty big deal, you know, and the rest of them, Venmo, like I can't get reimbursed if I buy a friend dinner or something like that. And got blacklisted from all the circles, CPAC, all the shows, Republican Party, whatever. And I recognize that it's not only my criticism of Israel, but the way that I do it. But of course, that's at the center of it, is that in principle, I'm against Jewish power, influence, the Israel lobby, etc. And I guess the biggest anxiety or insecurity about this, which I've talked about on my show, and we talked about a little bit earlier too, is this idea that now they're going to step in to kind of mediate this conversation. And in other words, they're going to try and draw a big red line that keeps me on the other side of it. And not just me. I would describe it, I'll give you a concession because I think you're being fair and you're being honest and I'm being honest. There's a big insecurity. And by insecurity, I don't mean like I'm not the prettiest girl at the ball. I mean insecurity in the sense of there is this mass awakening. This is a moment where we can really get these issues into the conversation, and someone like myself is in the Overton window, let's say. And not just that I can have a career, but my ideas can really take off. And the biggest concern when this was happening, and what it appeared to me to look like, is that you and a few other more elevated Israel critics were going to kind of slam the door shut behind. They were going to kind of bring you in. And the reason they would bring you in is because you're Jewish, and that's part of it.
Who was bringing me in, you think?
Like you were on Joe Rogan.
But I was on Rogan long before October 7th.
But to talk about this.
Yeah, but I was always talking about this shit on Rogan. I mean, like, look, I mean, I may have not been as focused on it because, this became the thing to be focused on. But all the stuff that I'm talking about and how involved Israel was, I was talking about, before that. Like, Joe's a friend of mine. He's been having me on since 2016. I don't think he had me on because I was Jewish.
No, not that he brought you on like, hey, I need to invite a Jewish person, but it's like, let's be honest, you did the whole circuit. You did Tucker, Candace, Piers. I think you were on Tim Pool.
Oh,
Joe.
Yeah.
These are all shows I was banned from. And you got to look at it from my perspective, maybe to see my state of mind.
Sure.
Last year when Candace got kicked out of Daily Wire, her live chat was lit up every day. Bring on Nick, and she was deliberately ignoring that and didn't want me on. Now, I was banned on YouTube, but I'm also more extreme. Now, same is true of like Tucker, all the Tim Pool, people have been trying to get me on his book.
No, I've seen it. Yeah.
Right. And so, and why am I not allowed on? Of course, it's my view that I was canceled for this issue. And so to see you go onto the show, and people say it's jealousy. Maybe there's a little resentment there too, but it was a bigger concern that as a Jewish person, and also, by the way, not just that you're Jewish, but as a libertarian, you come at it from a different place. You're a non-interventionist, a Ron Paul guy. And I even have this disagreement with Tucker on some level too. So it's not just you. My big worry is the conversation going to stop at, we need to end all these wars and like the neocons are the problem? Because my critique goes further. And it says that it actually does have to do with Jewish identity. Jewish identity is so powerful and so potent. Jews refuse to assimilate. They're so powerful. They're so tribalistic. They're loyal to each other. Not all of them, but a lot of them. And that is actually where the Israel loyalty proceeds from. It's this anxiety. We need Israel because what happens if it goes south here? We need to be powerful in America to prevent a majority from rising up against us. And it's kind of that identity issue, which, and that's why I'm open to talking to you or even somebody like a Bill Ackman or a Sean McGuire or a Shapiro and say, I recognize Jews are a part of America. They always have been, and they're some of the finest Americans actually. But people recognize it cannot go on this way where we have an open society, but they have this loyalty and kind of play by a different set of rules. And anyway, so my concern is that what it looked like to me is you're being brought onto the shows and they know maybe that you'll never go that far as a Jewish person, or maybe even as a libertarian. And a big red line was being drawn and saying, but you are still an anti-Semite. You are still banned on YouTube. You are banned on the shows. Fuck you. You're all the way over here. And that's why I like you and I respect you and I think you're brilliant. And I didn't mean to attack you as a guy, although maybe I crossed the line here and there, but you did become a very central, and you do recognize an influential figure in this big conversation. And I looked at you maybe as like, whether you intended to or not, as a mediating force or a mitigating force in the conversation. That's where I came at it from.
Okay. Either the best or one of the best groups on that issue. Jews opposed the war in Iraq way ahead of the general public. And like right-wing Christians were like the worst group on that. And so, but again, my target isn't them. My target isn't the people.
Right.
My target is like the people who propagandized them into believing that. And so if the thing is like, hey, I stopped short at like actually naming the Jews, it's like, well, yeah, because I don't think that's right. And I don't like, yes, there, and we can get into more of this, but like, no, like Barry the dentist has nothing to do with any of this. And he, you know, like, I think on some level, maybe I'm wrong, but I also don't think you're really trying to gin up hatred toward that guy. And so maybe that's why I stopped short of blaming the Jews. I think it's sloppier and not as accurate.
Well, I'm glad you said that, because I think it's important just on a basic level to say that we don't agree on everything. Like we are distinct, and I wouldn't even say it's about further or closer. It's just that we are coming at it from different places. You believe it's the neocons, and it's in particular the war party and Israel and how those interact. And me, as an identitarian, I do look at the world through an identity-based lens, that you've got whites, blacks, Jews, and they all have political interest. They all identify as these groups. They group up based on them, and then those groups have conflicting interests. That's what politics has become, is like meeting out those interests. Like, is it in the interest of white people to go to war in Iraq? No, but for Jews, yes, because they have this connection to Israel. And same about all these other things. And so, you know, even getting back to our beef, we could quibble about, you know, I don't think there's some conspiracy. I don't think they got together and said, let's invite Dave because, you know, he's going to like maintain censorship and Jewish control. Like, I don't believe that. But I do believe that you clearly take the more moderate position, or even I would say the more liberal position. As a libertarian, you're like a lowercase l liberal in the sense that you think that it's, like you said, it's not Jews in themselves or Jewish identity in itself. It is particular people in power, in particularly the state, that are doing these violent policies, whereas me, it is maybe a more radical rejection of liberalism. And I think that, you know, maybe you're informed by your Jewish identity, or you're just ideologically believe that. It is a more moderate position, and they platform that because that's the version they want. That's the version that is safer for a Tim Pool or whoever. That's the version that the system is maybe comfortable with. That's what they might be willing to accept. And they don't want to take it to the place of the Jews for the reason, maybe for the good reason you described. And by the way, I'll give you another concession because I want to be objective. There are people that are legitimately hating Jews right now.
There are.
I saw in Florida, they're pulling up on Jews with like water pistols and spraying them with water. And I got on my show and I said, fuck that.
Yeah,
I said,
and I appreciate that.
Yeah, because I don't believe in that. I'm not a piece of shit. If I saw Ben Shapiro on the street, I saw him on the street and I said, hey man, why did you do a speech? You didn't say my name. I didn't run up and try and fight him.
Yeah.
You know? And I don't believe in attacking.
They made it out like you did.
Yeah, right. Like I attacked his kids or something. Yeah. Human shields, right? But he picked up his kid when he walked across the street. It's like, okay, bro. But you know, like I don't believe in picking on random people. I'm not a cruel or hateful guy. And you do see that. And that video bothered me in particular because if people start to think it's okay to do that, you know, the ADL isn't necessarily wrong about the idea that it is slippery slope. You know, you pull up on somebody with a water pistol. Okay, what if it's a paintball gun next time? Is that really okay? That people are going to be harassed and like shot at with a airsoft gun or a paintball gun? No, that's bullshit. And that's denying basic dignity, basic rights. That's not Christian. That's not American. And there is an excess of that. And I agree that it should be sort of contained. But I think there's a fine line between that and saying that it is a bigger issue than the neocons because, you know, when it comes to these influential Jews, like Larry Ellison, let's say, he's not religious, but he's tight with Netanyahu. Jeffrey Epstein was tight with the left in Israel. And to the extent that you're right, Jews were the biggest critics of the Iraq war, in many cases, yeah, there's liberal Jews, but they're liberal because that's a strategy for Jews to succeed. They have these debates. What is best for the Jews? And like Bret Stephens at the New York Times, he mentored Bari Weiss. He says, Trump,
God, I hate him so much.
And he sucks, He's a neocon, case in point.
Yeah, I got in a big fight with him on Gutfeld's show years ago. He was such a smarmy prick. Anyway, whatever. But yeah,
douche.
Oh, God, it's the worst, the worst.
Yeah, but he says in 16 or 17, he goes, Trump is bad for the Jews because he is opposing the liberal values that have been so good to us as Jews. And it's like that sort of encapsulates when, like the ADL, for example, gets criticized. They say, well, the ADL's making Jews look bad. Or they're going after people like Shapiro and protecting people like Ilhan Omar. In other words, they're attacking Jewish Zionists, but they're not hard enough on the progressive left. And what I see there is still a distilled Jewish self-interest, which is okay because we're all people and we're all advocating for the most for ourselves. But in America, we just need to do a better job of managing that. And I think that the Jewish community's out of control.
Yeah.
Is basically it.
Well, I would say, so in kind of like in a similar sense to because me and you both, we've both been accused of getting the call over the last few weeks, which turns out was just us calling each other and being like, I don't think there's any evidence that Israel did it. It's just, like you see it. I mean, I know because you talk about it, like the low IQ slop shit, where it's just kind of like, dude, this is okay. I know forever you weren't allowed to touch that button, and so you're touching the button because you weren't allowed to. But a stupid point, it's like you're allowed to touch it now, dude.
Yes,
and it's just not that impressive. It's kind of like a silly argument. Although I will admit it's quite funny at times.
Well, yeah, I mean, the edgelording, even for me, has lost its appeal. It just seems passé because 10 years ago, you couldn't say that stuff, and that's what made it provocative.
Yeah.
And now you can say it. So, and also, it's been done for 10 years. So, internet edgelord, oh, you've never met someone like me before. It's like, we've all seen that. But I would say that here's how I would characterize the issue, because I hear that a lot, that the Zionists and the anti-Semites are sort of in the self-reinforcing loop. And I would say that how I would characterize the problem is that, in some sense, the Jews are rational. The neocons are rational because what they're saying is there's kind of two answers to the Jewish question from the Jews, which is we need to return to the land because only when we have another Jewish kingdom will we have sovereignty and be able to protect ourselves. There's another answer to the Jewish question, which is if we push liberal universalism, everyone will tolerate us. If we push religious tolerance and racial tolerance,
right.
Then people see us as themselves or the greatest among the nations. These are two strategies, and they're both rational because by the way, there was anti-Semitism in Nazi Germany. Maybe that's I got the call to say that, but it's true.
I think that's the way things are. Is that a controversial thing?
Might be. I don't know.
Not even the Holocaust, just anti-Semitism.
Yeah.
They weren't so fond of him. That's for sure. Yes.
But it's like in Germany, but also in Russia, but also in America. There are quotas in the universities. Emerging from that time, it is like we say, the world's made up of races. They have these interests. It's in the Jewish interest to do these things. So Soros takes up the cause of the Open Society Foundation. And Open Society is based on this philosophical premise, I think from Bertrand Russell, which says we have tolerance and openness and egalitarianism. And the Likud party, or, the Haganah, the security element in Israel, they work to get power. And they say that to make the world safe for the Jews, we need Israel. To make Israel safe, we need control over everything west of the river. To do that, we need to destroy all our enemies in the region. Like, there is a rational chain of law. When they say Israel has a right to exist, they mean we can't exist if we're staring down the barrel of 10 countries that hate us. There's a logic there. And I would say that in some sense, that's a legitimate way to think. It's a legitimate interest. But I distinguish myself as a white person, as someone from Christendom, as an American. And I'm looking to disentangle the Jewish interest from the American interest and say that, when you say it's bad to say Hitler had aura, I disagree in a sense.
I'm not saying necessarily it's bad to say that. I'm saying that you understand that, like, that is going to be something that might make a lot of people go, oh yeah, I don't want to deal with that guy.
But here's where I would push back in a sense is, as a white person, like, why is it that the Holocaust is so toxic? It's because, Jews sort of made it that way. Like, we don't look at the Holodomor the same way. We don't look at China. And you know all these arguments.
I think that's a totally legitimate argument. It's something I've been saying for years, too. I think that the idea that Jews have a monopoly on World War II is like insane. And or that anybody should, like prioritize past Jewish suffering over other sufferings. I mean, like, yeah, it's a horrible thing happened, but
can I just
sure, go ahead.
So, when I say Hitler had aura, I'm trying to basically set a new paradigm where, it's like as Americans and moreover as white people, it's like that doesn't have the same impact on us emotionally. It not necessarily. We only feel like that way because of movies, because of museums, because of propagandizing. And, so when I look at like Larry Fink, Bill Ackman, David and Larry Ellison, I look at them as part of a corporate entity. Like they're not individuals that happen to be Jewish. They are the Jews. They're organized. They work together. And as an American, I basically want to take power from them and give it back to Americans. And that necessarily is going to make them weaker and more vulnerable as a community. And, so when they say that's anti-Semitic, it's like, of course, everything that's taking power from them to give it to us is going to inherently like bolster the narrative that they're becoming more vulnerable. But it's a necessary part of getting power.
Yeah,
and
I kind of get what you're saying. Like I used to say it like, I used to say that as long as you like, if you translate the words right, that like Hillary Clinton is telling the truth, yes. Like in a sense, like when you go they'd be like Hezbollah is a threat. And the truth is that Hezbollah is a threat to Israel's ability to occupy southern Lebanon. I don't know if I want to say it's more based on business than ideology, but business is like a huge, huge factor in all of this, right? Like it's not as if the Zionists weren't able to gain so much control of the American military machine because simply they tricked everybody or something. It's because it was good for business. Mm-hmm. And you can watch this. I mean, they went, all the neocons went and they made their independent relationships with the military industrial complex. Look at all those Bill Kristol think tanks and who's funding that think tank? Oh, look at that, Lockheed Martin. Ain't that a coincidence? Right. And so in the same way that, like there are, say, thinkers like John Rawls or John Maynard Keynes, who are like beloved figures in Washington. But it's not because any of them read the books or care about the argument. It's just that they prescribed more power for Washington, D.C. Mm-hmm. And so Washington, D.C. is like, you made an excellent point. It's not like anyone there was like they were reading Hayek or something and then reading, Rawls and going, this guy's arguments are superior. It's just good for business, man. Yeah. That's a big part of it, at least.
Well, I don't disagree at all because that's sort of the nature of institutions. They're self-perpetuating. They'll prescribe themselves bigger budgets and more missions and things. So I totally agree with that. That's the professional managerial class, what they do.
Right.
But where I would push back is saying that, let's say, for example, like Larry Ellison. Larry Ellison is the second richest guy in the world. They're buying the media. Him and his son are buying TikTok. They're buying CBS. Who does he put in charge of CBS? Bari Weiss. Bari Weiss was helped by Hazony and Brett Stevens. It's like, that very clearly is a Jewish club. And they're cutting through society. And yeah, they run in other elite circles. And yeah, they have their accomplices that are not Jewish. Even, look at the Trump administration. Trump brokered that deal. He's a Gentile. But he got money from Miriam Adelson. And his grandchildren are Jewish because his son-in-law is Jewish. And it's like, it's almost like that exception doesn't prove the rule. And you're right about the Vulcans, Condi and Bush and all them. They're Gentiles too. But it's like, it seems that society is always being pushed by this organized minority. Because you're right, there are Rawlsian liberals that are white, and there are, evangelical Christians that are white that are neocons. But it just seems like the Jews because by definition, they're organized in a way that nobody else is. Like Bush is not organized as a white guy or even very much as a Christian. But you do have like a World Zionist Congress. You do have a World Jewish Congress. You have the, Conference of Major American Jewish Organizations. I don't even think people realize the extent to which Jews are organized in community centers by Chabad, in university with their fraternities, and in business, and in their localities. It's like they're extremely organized. And as far as the average Jew is concerned, yeah, they're not running the banks. I don't think your average Jew is like a spy, but I do think that your average Jew is inherently distrusting of like patriotism and nationalism. It's like Sarah Silverman said when she saw her white boyfriend put a American flagpole on her lawn, she said it reminded her of Hitler. How many Jews is that attitude prevalent? When they saw Trump, they thought the same thing. Fascism. They said it could not happen here. It's sort of that same attitude. And I think, here is what I will concede. I think that by we, I mean me, if my movement wants to have power and really put America first, it means we are going to have to sideline, by definition, Jews that put the Jewish nation first.
Yeah, well, I think and Christians too, for that matter. I mean, like,
I disagree. I think America's
well,
a Christian country.
I'm saying Christians who put Israel first.
Oh,
for that matter,
yeah,
too.
for
So
sure.
I'm saying, which there are plenty of.
Sure.
And look, it's a huge part of this, because you talk about the like kind of organization, but I think that's very true for evangelical Christians who are constantly having preachers, tell them that like this is your duty, is to have this political outlook. I mean, there's tens of millions of them in the country, and like, look, you can always say, well, that's the Jews manipulating them. But again, it just seems like this is presuming the conclusion. It's like,
are we not being manipulated though in that way?
Of course. No, I'm not denying that. I'm just saying it's not just Jews at the top of doing the manipulation.
And I agree, but that's where I have to come in as a Christian white American and say we have to disentangle these things and say, wake up the evangelicals and say, look, this is not, you're American, you're Christian. They are not Christian. They are not American. It is not in our interest. We have to take our own side.
I'm curious, what do you make of the new revelations or this dynamic with Charlie Kirk? It's a weird spot for you to be in, being such a rival and an antagonist of a person, and then they're killed in this horrible way. And so it's a weird spot. But what are your thoughts on this latest?
Well, I agree with how you said it, which is, look, I mean, if someone other than Tyler Robinson killed Charlie Kirk, I'd of course be very interested in that, but I just don't see evidence for that. And people are trying to. It's like anything. In hindsight, you can look at every person's reaction in the crowd and say they're a decoy or an operative, whatever. There's really nothing hard or conclusive that proves anything other than that happened yet. And I'm open to possibilities. What is interesting, but a different conversation, maybe related, is the Israel thing. And I think very clearly, as you and Tucker and Candace and others and Max Blumenthal have said, there's ample evidence that at the minimum, there was something dynamic there. He was a pro-Israel guy for many years. Now, seems like that was in flux, and a lot of the evidence has kind of been knocked out. This Bill Ackman retreat, Bill Ackman produced the texts, and Charlie arranged the whole thing. And it was a forum where I'm sure disagreement was expressed, but it showed generally they were still aligned. More interesting was his interview with Megyn Kelly, where clearly he platformed Tucker and you, and it seemed that supporting Israel was in contention, which they hate that that's even on the table, because it matters how you set the table. It doesn't necessarily even matter what your position is, but they don't want that to be up for debate. Do we support Israel? Not a question they want people to ask.
Well, especially when you're losing the debate. That doesn't help either.
Yeah, especially when you get booed and killed in the debate. They don't like that either. And so even that, they were really pushing back on Charlie, threatening. I guess the new revelation is they took the money. They took the $2 million. It's a pretty big organization, but that's not a negligible chunk of change for Charlie and Turning Point USA. And he goes in the group chat, and assuming, like you said, that it's authentic, that is, I think, the most stark thing we've heard from him on the record, where he says, I have to leave the Israel camp. And I would say that's even different than what he said on Megyn Kelly. Because on Megyn Kelly, he said, oh, you're going to call me an anti-Semite? He sort of stopped himself. He said, well, you're going to lose me. That's what he was going towards.
Yeah,
you're not going to lose me. He goes, but I'm going to be deflated. In that text, he says, I'm out. And I would characterize that as I was his rival, and I'm very cynical about him. He was kind of caught between a rock and a hard place. He was really in the middle because, like you said, it's young people. They are Israel critical, and he had to go and defend the bullshit to them at the campus, in the arena, in the pit. So it's easy for them in the ivory tower to say, yeah, we love Israel still. He's actually having to get the shit, and 100 Groypers on the line saying, why do you still love Israel? And I think that he recognized it became a liability and started to try and accommodate everybody, Tucker and the other side, Candace and the other side, the Groypers, so to speak, or the Dave Smith people and the other side, And the other side wasn't having it. They said, you better get the fucking line or we're pulling the plug. And I think he defiantly said, I will not be bullied. I thought it would have been interesting to see where that would have went, but sadly we'll never know.
There's something revealing about the fact that even, say, people like Megyn Kelly and Charlie Kirk will get this same type of treatment when they step out of line.
Right. Yeah, no, I totally agree. And people are, I think, misreading it a little bit, like he was this. It's such an important point you made that we do something different, because when we go on our shows, we say, I think, I feel. He didn't really have that luxury.
Right.
Because he was not in the business actually of telling it like he sees it. He was in the business of, it was more political, getting everybody to vote, keeping everybody happy, pushing directionally towards the right. And so when people say he was going to be this rebel, he had this epiphany, he just had to get it out, I don't think that's it. I think, like you said, he was put in an impossible situation because the underlying reality had changed. The underlying political dynamic, the right-wing youth are what they are, and the donors are what they are. And as a matter of fact, I don't think he left Israel. I think Israel left him. And that's sort of what the text said. He said, they leave me with no choice.
Yeah.
After they pulled the money, they said, we cannot tolerate, so we're taking the money. And he said, well, I'm not going to be held hostage by your money. I have to side with the ever-growing tent of people that are either indifferent or critical or anti or whatever. And so that is how I read it. And I agree. I mean, to the broader point, even the earlier conversation, Israel is in a lot of trouble, it seems. I was sort of skeptical, but this is very much in flux, because it is the right-wing youth. It's Tucker, it's Megyn Kelly, it's Charlie Kirk, it's France, it's Portugal, it's UK, it's Canada, it's like most of America. And, I guess the question is what's on the other side of it. If they win, well, they will have unprecedented power. With Iran out of the picture, they'll be an enormously powerful, maybe the regional power in the Middle East. If they lose, or if they don't get everything they want, then they might be in more peril than ever before. And I guess the remaining thing is kind of where it goes from here with Trump, because it's so weird how everything, in a sense, I don't believe that they killed Charlie Kirk, and yet his death, by revealing what it did, is going to play a big role in this conversation. Because like you said, it shows that the right wing is literally breaking up over this. Like, this issue is forcing this contradiction, and that contradiction is splitting the right, which is the ruling party, in the middle of the UN meeting, in the middle of the peace deal that's about to blow up. It's like, I think when all is said and done, we look at this 2-year period, it will contribute to that larger conversation. And then, where's Trump going to go with this?
Yeah.
Because he's the decider.
It's not even fair, man. Like, it's not like, you're like, one of these times I should have to switch and argue your side, because it's just too ridiculous. Like, it's so fucking indefensible. And you got to sit here and pretend, like, it's just, I'm sorry, you're not going to. And so we're just left in a situation now where, the young people they've all woken up to this shit, and there's really no putting it away after that.
Yeah. And what's sort of unnerving is like, if they can't put it back in the bottle, which, they're going to try, and they are trying. That's what this TikTok and CBS, and even, they're not even taking it at CBS. Like, everybody knows what that is. I saw all the presenters on like 60 Minutes were leaking to the press how much they hate Bari Weiss, and, they don't want to go along with all this. It's like, it becomes almost scary, because Netanyahu's been in power for almost 2 decades. And in a sense, it's like, this is sort of a modern situation. The war on terror, the Middle East, Netanyahu, the ascendancy of Likud, the neocons. This is like the past 25, 30 years. And it seems to sort of be sunsetting. Like, Netanyahu, if this war ends, for better, for worse, he's going to be out. And he will not, whoever his successor is, will not be able to keep the coalition together as well as he did. So maybe their influence diminishes there. The media environment is not centralized anymore, so they don't influence that either. In the last legs of whatever this period can be called, that this go for broke moment, what scares me is how desperate they're going to get. Yeah. And I think that's where maybe it makes sense they killed Charlie Kirk, because there's some recognition they are that desperate. Like that is a desperate hour for them when they're losing absolutely everybody, isolated. They're not winning the debates. They can't win it with the soft power, censorship, suppression, the rest of it. Do they then resort to total chaos, crisis, these kinds of operations? That, because it's sort of like the emperor has no clothes. It's, like you said, in our lifetimes, we've never seen something like this. Can they lose? Will they tolerate losing? What does that actually look like? And I think that's going to be resolved in the next 6 months. So it's going to be kind of freaky.
After continuing to bag Israel, the Epstein thing was a big one. The Iran thing was like a death blow. It was and at this point, it's not like there's another election coming up. We already kind of know what the Trump thing is. We've gotten some small wins. The border control is a big win. I shouldn't say that. That's not a small thing. He really did turn that around. He deserves credit for that. But everything else, Nick, everything else has just been a disaster. And so I don't know. I think we're in a similar place where it's like, no, fuck this. Yeah. I mean, you just can't tell me that it's like we have to just blindly support this while our country's still falling apart.
Yeah, I mean, there's just no argument anymore. In 2024.
I'm sorry, one of you guys just grab me a water? Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no. In 2024, there was at least this argument to be made that maybe it would be different this time. And like you said, you articulated the reasons why. They tried to kill him, they impeached him, they charged him. So the question was, is it going to be different this time? Did he learn? Is there going to be better people? And I get that. So I didn't begrudge people that did vote for him, but there were signs. Nikki Haley endorsed him, and he said we were going to go to war with Iran, basically. He said they were going to bring in the H-1Bs and all this stuff. And, and then they appointed the cabinet within 3 weeks. Rubio for Secretary of State. And I guess the interesting thing I have to say beyond what is obvious, which is that it's kind of crashing and burning, is I look at a guy like Kurt Mills, Kurt Mills at AmCon, and, he seems like he's a good guy. He's 100% on board, maybe more with you than me, but he knows relevant facts. And I remember watching him during the negotiation between Trump and, or I should say, Witkoff and Araghchi or whoever it was on the Iranian side. And he would go on Steve Bannon every week and say, any day now, they're going to make a deal and, Netanyahu's going to be put in his place. And I'm thinking, have you ever seen anything in history? It never goes that way. Yeah. And it never goes that way because, like you said before, it's sort of axiomatic. Trump is not willing to shut them down. He's just not willing to resist them or go there. He doesn't care enough or whatever the reason is. It's hard to know what's in his heart or in his mind. He won't do it. And then, I think it was 3 days before we went to war, he goes, it's not on radar that Trump is going to attack Iran. That's not on radar. It's buddy, read the tea leaves. Of course he's going to go and bomb Iran. So, and I kind of get where you're coming from about the Pompeo. I was even skeptical about the Pompeo thing because I said they got a list of these people they're going to put in. And that's why I'm a big believer in this. It's not even, people say, are you going to vote for a Democrat? We got to think beyond that. To me, it's just about rejection. They set the table, and you can't really choose what's on the table, but you could choose whether to eat or not, whether you're going to play the game. And so my bigger idea is just reject. And I like what you said. It encapsulates it. It's bullshit. No, thank you. You're promising stuff you're not going to deliver. When you put this stuff out there, the big, beautiful bill, $150 billion for border enforcement, they're not deporting even 1,000 people a day. It's nothing. And so I just look at these guys like Dan Caldwell crying on Tucker, at Kurt Mills, all that kind of stuff. People saying, we're going to hold their feet to the fire. We're going to pressure them. And I'm like, aren't you tired? We did that already. We did that in the first term. Because I was kind of in that place in the first term where it's we're going to control the personnel. We're going to do this. And I knew people in the admin. I knew people on the campaign that didn't get hired because they were on the campaign, because the people in the admin were from the Rubio campaign or the Bush campaign. And it's we just need something that at the end of the day is what we want, not a compromise. I know it's not how politics works, but we just need something that is promising and intends on delivering what we really care about. And Trump was never that, in my opinion.
And what is J.D. Vance going to run on? I mean, how is he going to capture that energy that Donald Trump had? We're furious with this system. The system is so corrupt and so dishonest and so such a betrayal to every American that we want someone to go in there and be a wrecking ball against them. How is J.D. Vance possibly going to capture that energy?
Right.
When there's nobody's believing it anymore.
Well, and with Trump, I feel like a lot of people just forgot really what he was. There were a lot, because I feel like not a lot of people actually voted for him in 2016 that are around now. Yeah. And you and I know, because we both, I mean, you're around longer than me, but we were both around then. And I feel like there's a lot of young people and maybe even like big supporters of Trump now that weren't really with him in 16. And so what I'm trying to say is, for a lot of people to have amnesia, they think that he's a Republican, he's a conservative, like, because that's really what he's become. That is what he was in 20. That's what he was in 24. He's against the radical left. He's against the Democrats. But in 16, he started out fighting the Republican establishment. And he really ran as like an independent. Yeah. And I always go back to the proposition of Trump. This is my basis for not voting for him last year, which is not, I'm better than the Democrats, which is the minimum. Yeah. You're a Republican. Well, he's better than Kamala. Okay, isn't that a given? Like, shouldn't you be? It's not that he's a conservative or anything like that. He said, the system is rigged and it's broken. I will break it because I'm rich. I'm so rich, I don't need to take their money. And if I don't have to take their money, I can actually deliver real change because I don't have to worry about upsetting them. That, in a nutshell, was the premise. And that was his appeal. He would go up on the stage and, like, you watch this now and you're like, where's this guy? That famous clip where he goes, they're booing him, and he goes, that's all donors in the audience. So I don't want their money. I don't need their money. And everyone resonated, right, left, and center, said, yeah, fuck the system. That's true. They're bought off. That's why nothing ever changes. He's rich. They can't buy him. That was the idea. Obviously wasn't true. Then now in 24, when he got 200 billion or 200 million from Tim Mellon and from Elon Musk and Ken Griffin and Mark Andreessen, the usual suspects. And with J.D. Vance, like you said, it's just even worse. It's disgusting that anyone's even considering voting for him, to me, because it's like, at least Trump had kind of a claim to be that guy because he was this like bombastic billionaire from the private sector. Vance is like your prototypical political artifact, like a creation in a lab, like fake career, fake name, fake book, patrons in the CIA, like he's a nerd. He's not even really that conservative, you know, the fake conversion. Maybe he's a real convert, but it seems too convenient. Like he's everything that Trump ran against. He's like Jeb Bush. He was calling Trump a Nazi and voted for McMullen, and it was a never Trumper. So, and I'm just unloading my case against him, but it's like they could not be more different. So to your point, how are you going to sell that? I don't know how any MAGA person is buying it, but I think they will.
But there's got to be some way, and especially now with the new media landscape, with the amount of influence that me and you have right now, I don't know, we've got some opportunities to say like, hey, no, we're not just going to go along with this. We ought to plant a flag at like one reasonable point and go, we're not bending on this.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think we need to throw our weight around, and we'll have a much better opportunity to do that because in 28, it's an open field on both sides. In 2016, 2024, Trump was like the 10,000-pound gorilla in the room, immovable. Like you, me, all of us put together, like no one was going to knock him off that trajectory, which is why maybe it was naive for me to like withhold the vote outside of like reasons in principle or for rhetoric. But in 28, we can shape the race because, like you said, I don't think Vance is a shoo-in at all. He's not a national figure. Very good chance he goes the way of DeSantis, where it's a failure to launch, it's a crash and burn situation. And then it's wide open. And I would say that, people say that I'm like a Democrat or like I wanted Kamala to win. And it's like, you think I don't know that Trump is better than Kamala. Everyone knows that. But I love what you said about these like knock-on second-order effects because you're 100% right. Biden winning and like Trump getting banned from YouTube and all that, that's probably why Elon bought Twitter. Like that maybe doesn't happen in a universe where Trump won the 2020 election and all the other downstream effects that took place. Trump being president now is sweeter than it would have been from 20 to 24. And you could have never predicted that, like you said, that Biden winning would force the pendulum to swing in the other direction. I think there was something true about, Trump and Kamala in 24. If Kamala inherited the war in Gaza and the Ukraine war, would we get something insanely radical in 28, like a real reset? Maybe. You can never know. What I would say, though, about 28, and this is maybe new, is like when you look at what Trump is doing, he's creating a lot of tension right now. The ICE raids, the militarization of law enforcement, the war everywhere in Venezuela, Ukraine, Iran, the advance of AI and technology. It's like, if a Democrat wins in 29, I'm moving to another country, because whoever comes into power from the left is going to want blood, because they're going to want vengeance for all. If they regroup, that's sort of presumptuous. Yeah. If they regroup and reorganize, they're going to kill us, because like in Chicago, I live right by where this is happening. They set up this detention facility. They're rounding people up, putting hype edits of it on Twitter. It's pissing liberals off. Liberals are going to the place, protesting. The cops are beating the shit out of them and laughing and taunting them. More protesters come. Now they're ramming cars into ICE cars. The cops are shooting them. Now they're bringing in DHS. It's like, we've gone so far up this escalation ladder in like 3 months. And what I fear is that Trump is not going to finish the job. He's not going to salt the earth and destroy Antifa. So all he's doing is pissing these people off. And that means the violence is going to get worse. They're going to organize. We're going to get like Mamdani for president in 28, or, something along that vein. And that's why I think it's really important that like a Republican does win, but it just can't be Vance. So like, that's kind of how I'm thinking about it, because they're really barking up the wrong tree, in my opinion. They're signing checks they can't cash.
We're in you can say things on Twitter now that you couldn't have dreamed of saying. But now that the censorship regime has been rolled back and like Nazi shit is just flooding in, it does seem to me like, oh man, this is like setting up the pretext. It's setting up the pretext for like, hey, you guys wanted to have freedom of speech? Well, here's what it actually looks like. Mm-hmm. Now can we all agree that this must be shut down? And like, no, I'm not saying I know that's going to happen, but it's a real concern of mine. And I wonder what you think about all that.
I totally agree. And the first time that kind of was clocking to me was when, I think it was on Fresh and Fit. And I love Myron, and I like Fresh too. But it was on their show where I think some like ghetto black woman said like, fuck F the Jews and we love it. And it went like super viral. And like,
yeah, I think I saw this clip.
Usual Suspects seized up on that. And it's like, and I didn't say anything to him privately, but you could see where that's going to go in very short order, where there's no shortage of stuff like that you can find, that certain people are putting out there on a daily basis. And it's not measured. It's not nuanced. There's no point. It's just vulgar. It's vulgar. It is hateful. It definitely probably crosses a line. It doesn't like serve the conversation. Like, it's one thing to say Jewish identity, blah, blah, blah. It's another to say F these people. Like, that's different. And I 100% believe there's going to be another censorship push, and they're going to use shit like that to justify it. So that's why I've really tried, and I'm not the most disciplined person, but I've really been trying this year to be more restrained and measured. And that, and the audience, they perceive everything as cucking. If you're not sprinting towards the most vulgar, extreme, fanatical, they say that you got the call. But it's so important because there is a window of opportunity here. And you and I have been around long enough to recognize that, because you're right. It was a different country in 2015, completely different country. And we don't want to squander that. But then again, you wonder how much of it is even in our control. Will they do it anyway?
No, I think that's right.
We should control what we can control.
Like you said, we have an opportunity that feels almost like a trap.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like, it just like has that feeling like you're like, wait a minute, this whole thing has been lifted and we're all cool now. It's like, wait, we all agree it's retarded to trans kids? Everyone agrees. Okay. That's kind of interesting. But at the same time, it does feel like, okay, the second act is coming, or the next act is coming, and I worry about what that's going to be. Yeah,
I totally agree. You're waiting for the next shoe to drop, because we've experienced this like suffocating political control that seems like they almost know every permutation of how things are going to end up. And now it's like, so Mark Zuckerberg decided free speech is good now? Like, I don't believe that. I don't believe that there is an ulterior motive. And I think that I'm always just in favor of doing the thing that's unpredictable. Because if to the extent that they have power, it's because they can predict what will happen next or how we'll behave. And so that's why I try to just surprise people and do the thing they're not expecting me to do. Like if they bring me back on Twitter and maybe there's an angle, it's because they're expecting me to be what they think I am, which is a troll or a hater or whatever. So maybe walk it back or be restrained or, and I think that we really need to be intentional and cautious. Like after Charlie died, I called up a lot of people that I know that are like influencers. And I was like, we just really need to be careful to not step into a trap, because it seems like whenever there's a crisis, and you never think it's going to happen, but when there's a crisis, you get kind of riled up and you act in ways that are not smart, and by you, I mean anyone does. Yeah. Me, you, anyone, because emotions are high. Rationality goes out the window, and it's easy to forget all the hard-fought lessons we've learned over the years that have, produced bad results for us. So, with all the violence, chaos, the uncertainty, unprecedented nature of where we are, we just have to be extremely cautious, vigilant, intentional about what we're doing, what we're saying. It just can't be sloppy, because if we're sloppy, the thing about Netanyahu and them is they are really smart and they are you think they don't know? They know. Like you said, they know astutely. Even to the extent that Matt Walsh says, let them kill each other. That's a brilliant innovation because they knew the pro-Israel thing was losing. And you think they're just going to keep pressing that button until it doesn't work anymore. No, they switched up quick and said, we can't get him to support. We'll get him to say this line about, well, we don't want Muslims here. They reinvent all the time. So the game is not over. That's what people need to keep in mind. You run through the finish line, you run through first base, it isn't over. And I like what you said. They always have something up their sleeve. So you can't presume that we're running away with it. We get careless, sloppy, do a victory celebration. It's still in flux.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so I wanted to ask you a little bit about this because I think this is a topic that I find very fascinating, and I think you're kind of uniquely like a perfect example of this. But so 2019, you got your YouTube channel taken, and then was that around the same time you got kicked off everything else, or was it like Twitter? When did you get kicked off of that? I know you ultimately got let back on, but there was a period where you were gone.
I was banned from YouTube in February 2020, and then Twitter in July 21. Okay,
all right. So there's a real interesting dynamic to me, and I watch this happen with people who I know, people I'm friendly with. I knew Gavin McInnes, a good example of somebody who got canceled off everything and really hurt him, really sidelined him. Stefan Molyneux kicked off everything, really sidelined him. It's almost like they're not in the conversation anymore, at least the way that they were. Right. Milo, a great example of that, where he was really seemed like he was about to break through to mainstream success, and they squashed that. And somewhere along the years, it seemed like that started backfiring. I thought Andrew Tate was an interesting example. I had never heard of Andrew Tate until he got canceled from everything, and then all of a sudden it was just like dominating the algorithm, and he was everywhere. And I think you were one of those guys too. So even you got back on Twitter, and I'm sure that helped, but you were already kind of surging before, I think, if I've got that correct. And so was there a period? So you're out there in the unpersoned world, and was there a time where you were like, oh, this is actually working here in this world? And what were you streaming on?
I was on Cozy TV, which is my own site.
Oh, you just made your own thing. Okay, cool. Yeah. So I was like, I haven't heard of that. But so that was, and did you start getting numbers there?
No, I was languishing. It was tough. I mean, the thing about deplatforming is it works. When I got banned from everything, I was not getting great numbers. It was when I got back on Rumble that I got on Rumble in the first place.
Rumble seems like it was a big deal in the set because they were the first one who really started doing numbers.
Yes. Yeah, and it was a live streaming platform. For a period I was banned from all live streaming platforms from roughly 21 until Rumble I think opened up live streaming to everybody, which maybe was like 2023, right around there. That was the wilderness. I literally could not stream my show unless I made a website, which is very costly and time consuming. And, what helped was being prolific and having a core of supporters.
Yeah.
I do a show every day. There's a parasocial relationship. It's a cult-like following. But a lot of these guys, they either stop making content like Molyneux, they upload it to a platform that doesn't work. Like BitChute was pretty rough in the early days. And Gavin put all his stuff behind a paywall. And that's just, in my opinion, a bad business model, because it's like you got to give out the free samples to get people to walk through the door.
Right.
And when it's to pay to get in, you don't get the conversion.
You don't get new listeners. Yeah.
Exactly. So I had a strategy where I said, I'm going to take a financial hit. Like, I made no money for 2 years, but I knew it's like, if I keep people coming through the door, eventually things will change, or I can still make a little money if it's free and if it's good. And that's how I was able to just kind of like survive, but I'm still dependent on platform access.
Yeah, but it does, okay, fair enough. But it does just seem like, like whatever, if the goal was to shut you up, well, that certainly didn't work out very well for them. And there does seem, I think there's just something interesting about the fact that it seems, at least like we were just saying, we're waiting for the other shoe to drop, but it seems, at least for the time being, that the cancel thing just stopped working and actually started like kind of injecting more life into the people who were getting canceled. Like I thought, like, obviously you're saying these years were rough, but on net, I think you may have benefited from that. And maybe I'm wrong, because maybe if you were just on YouTube and Twitter this whole time, you lost out on a lot from that. So like, maybe I'm wrong about that, but at the very least, it seems to have not worked or something like that. And I thought Andrew Tate and Alex Jones too were like kind of examples of that, where it was just like, that's not, you didn't remove them from the conversation. They're more, like all three of you guys are more present than ever. Whereas some of those other guys just like never kind of got back to where they were. I guess Gavin is back on Twitter now, I think. I think he
just last week, I think. Yeah, to me, it's more, in my opinion, a function of your strategy, and just kind of, it seems that the people that have survived the longest are the people with a show. Only because if you have a show, people know when to tune in. It is every day, like Alex Jones does 3 hours every day. And he's on radio, which really helps, because I don't think he ever got censored from there. But I was never a believer in the Streisand effect thing, because it's like, I can't process credit cards for my business. There's like, there's no Streisand effect where you can't make money, you can't have a bank account, and all that stuff. So it really, in my opinion, was Trump got banned from everything. And I think venture capital and private equity, they do what they do best, and they looked at him like an undervalued asset. And they came in and said, this guy's banned from everything. We can actually upset Silicon Valley and the market there if we make censorship-proof Rumble. It's like, if I'm banned on Twitter, no one's going to build a new Twitter around me. But if Trump is banned on Twitter, you actually can build a Rumble, a True Social around him. And in a way, that explains to me 2024, because that is who came in. Little tech, it's Andreessen Horowitz, it's the Teal Club, it's Elon Musk. He was kind of like their guy, commercially and politically. And then I think the rising tide lifted all the boats. That's kind of how I interpret it, because we were headed towards like total annihilation of free speech. Like, my listener base shrunk dramatically when I was in the wilderness.
Yeah, wasn't it wild seeing like everybody flip out about the FCC chairman threatening Jimmy Kimmel?
Yeah,
there's free speech is finally at risk in America after like the last 5 years. And you're like, really? Oh, really? Was this the one? Which, by the way, was a stupid thing for the FCC chair to say that. Totally, like, talk about seizing defeat from the jaws of victory.
Yes.
Like, okay, now you handed them a talking point. This guy is dying in the wilderness, this is a couple other things I want to talk about. I want to talk about censorship, and then I want to hit like Tucker, Candace, and some of that stuff. And but so there there's just been a lot of questions that are raised over the censorship stuff. And like I said, there's some areas that I struggle with myself, like how exactly I feel. I think I kind of landed about where you were on the Charlie Kirk thing. Like, look, like the government shouldn't be involved. They're not technically inciting violence, but like there really should be consequences for this. There should be some type of social consequences. And in fact, I'm a big believer in social consequences. But what do you think, like, in terms of, I think I heard you say something like, look, the right's in power now. When the left gets back in power, they're going to be censoring people. Mm-hmm. So maybe we should be doing things like that now. But like, what do you mean by that? Or what, like, do you think the FCC chair, I mean, you seem to agree with me when I said that, but like, should the FCC chairman be threatening Jimmy Kimmel and people like that?
No, I think that was just tactically dumb.
Yeah,
but
I agree.
I do believe that we are in like a war, basically. We are in a race. And we know that because, like you said, under Biden, like they were engaging in censorship. It was coming from the press office. It was coming from, I don't know how many departments and agencies, but it was quite a few of them that they were giving orders. Take this account, that post, take that down, the OSHA stuff. And they wasted no time in doing that. Like Biden got in and it was just a whirlwind of J6, censorship, everything you can think of, a naked power grab. And I do believe that if Trump leaves office and a Democrat comes in, they're going to do it again. And so I'm a big believer that the right wing needs to really disempower the left institutionally. Like if they were doing it under a different pretense, I would like what they're doing at Harvard and Columbia. The problem is they're doing it.
It's not on behalf of America.
Right. Yeah. For some other reason. But it's like, yeah, like we should work to disorganize the left. We should work to go after their radicals like Antifa. We should put the pressure on them hard. We should put the pressure on the far left. We should put the pressure on their funding mechanisms, their stuff, because if we lose, they will do it to us indiscriminately. They have no qualms about it, and they'll be more competent about it. And like, then they'll make the country the way they want it to be. So yeah, I'm a big believer in like, we should use the levers of power. I don't know about like censoring them on Twitter, let's say, but institutionally, yeah, we should be playing to win.
Yeah, I said on my show, and this is, from my particular strain of libertarianism or whatever, but I was like, I basically said the same thing as you. I was like, look, I don't view it as a free speech violation because like Jimmy Kimmel isn't a person anymore. Like you're part of the regime. Like once there is, and I know it's a bit of a gray area of where you draw the line when someone, I'm not going to say, hey, you pay your taxes, therefore you're part of the regime. But like, no, when you just become what Jimmy Kimmel is, you're no longer a citizen expressing their views. Look, man, I never bought all the leftist claims about January 6th were always like hyperbolic insanity. It wasn't an insurrection, and Donald Trump didn't incite violence. But at the same time, if you're a leader and you told everybody that they just stole this election from me, and then you said you're going to go there, and then your people did what would be reasonable to do if the election was stolen from them, right? Like it is not the claim, just like the Democrats were making the claim with Russia. It's like, well, then we should be nuking Moscow. Like according to what you're saying, we should be at war with them now. Well, according to what you're saying, Donald Trump, you should storm the Capitol if that's the case. And so he kind of led his people into this. And then literally because at the end of the day, it does seem that really what motivates Donald Trump is his own ego, his own greatness. And if they were like, oh, you're going to get impeached or removed, or you're going to get this if you don't go. So he went, okay, fine. And then threw his own people under the bus. I thought that was like disgusting.
Yeah, and he had the full power to pardon them in the first place.
Right there.
Could have done it. He had 3 weeks to do it, or 2 weeks, I guess is what it was. And yeah, at least for me, I was almost charged with conspiracy. They were considering charges against me. That was in the New York Times. And, and other people obviously did go to jail. And I was there because Trump told me to be, like Trump. And by that, I mean, I was going to be at the speech. I was not going to be at the Capitol building. The speech was at the Ellipse. Capitol was miles away. And Trump said, we are going to the Capitol to make our voices heard. I said, oh, well, Trump's going to be there. I guess it's cool. So I went there, and if I had been in jail, and other people were, is that not his fault? He saw no responsibility. And that is kind of his MO. I mean, he throws a lot of people under the bus. He is, I think, motivated by vanity. And here's the problem with that. If he's not in it to win it, then he's activating the enemy with no intention of following through.
That's right.
He got in office. He's like, oh, I won. So it's not that serious for him. And he can pardon himself when this is all over. And he's rich, so he can go. But if the country turns upside down, we're all going to be paying the price. And so that was my big beef with him, among others, in 24, is like, look, you guys don't understand. He did not learn his lesson. He never does. He hasn't changed at all. If anything, he's just more tired and cares less. And as a consequence, it's going to be just as inefficient as the first term, in which case we shouldn't even bother. In which case we're better off not poking the bear. Let's just let Kamala catch a hot potato and forget about it, because he's going to start something he can't finish. That was kind of my problem.
Full transparency here. I do not believe that you're a Fed. I don't fucking know. Who the hell knows? Everybody, you're a Fed. Everyone's a Fed. Right. I don't know who's the Fed and who's not a Fed. But I know that this was something that, Tucker had said, and I think you were very upset by this, and understandably so. I think that's It's a particular type of accusation that is, it's a very frustrating one, I think, in a way, because it's kind of like, oh, you're just, everything you said is undermined now, right? Like, I don't have to deal with anything. And I think that, you know, anyway, I understand why that upset you a lot. But I think from what I've heard, a lot of this comes from the January 6th stuff and the accusations that you were encouraging people to go into the Capitol. So what's the deal with all that?
Well, it even goes back to something else, which is the Joe Kent story, which I brought up before, because, you know, I was at January 6th, and at January 6th, I got up there and I gave a speech. And in the speech, I gave speeches at all these events, by the way. I went to the Atlanta State Capitol, Harrisburg, Phoenix, Lansing, and even D.C. And I gave speeches at Governor's Mansion, state capitals in D.C. before. And J6, you know, we thought it was going to be the speech on the Ellipse, and then we were going to maybe do something at the actual Capitol building, although I wasn't going to be there. But there were plans for there to be stages there. And, you know, so like I said, I went to the speech. Trump said, go to the thing. We went to the thing, and somebody said, you got to give a speech. So I said, okay, find me a megaphone. I get a megaphone. I jump up on a thing, and we're like 500 feet from the Capitol. We're not even near the building. We're like on the street next to the lawn. And in the speech, I said, we're taking the Capitol back, keep moving, take down the barriers. And then we left. You know, we didn't go in. I wasn't even close to the building. And this video had been out there for a long time. And people knew I was there and didn't get charged. I got my money frozen, although I wasn't public about that. I got on the no-fly list. I went public with that, went public with the money later. There was never an accusation until like about a year later. And then people started to create this story that, you know, that I was leading people in and I didn't get charged. Now, where it started with Tucker is with Joe Kent. Because now, like 2 years later, I make potentially Joe Kent lose the election. And Joe Kent was a close friend of Tucker's. Joe Kent is in the CIA. And that is how we attacked him. We attacked him on that basis. And of course, it was in self-defense. He said that he disavowed me, condemns all my views, we're keeping you out. And I looked at him as very threatening because like we talked about before, he's kind of boxing me out intentionally. So we made him lose. And it was a couple months after this is where I first got the inkling of it, Michelle Malkin, who's a good friend of mine.
I know Michelle. I've had her on the show before. She's great.
She's amazing.
Yeah.
And she's married to a Jewish guy, so you can't be mad at her.
Look at that. Good woman.
And he's great too, actually. He's pretty based himself. But so she communicates to me through a mutual friend that she gets this really weird call from Tucker. She says that Tucker never calls her. Sometimes she texts him and he'll give her thumbs up, but they don't really talk. She says, but he calls her out of the blue asking about me and asking about Kanye. Did Nick make Kanye go crazy? Did Nick try to take Trump out at the Kanye dinner?
I don't think anyone can hold you responsible for that.
You can blame me for a lot, but that's
no, this one rests squarely on the shoulders of Pete Davidson. We all know that. We all know that. You get your family stolen by Pete Davidson, you're going to lash out at the world.
You're going to get radicalized. Yeah. But so he's calling her asking about all this stuff and about J6. And she said it was very strange. Like it felt like he was reading from a script. He was asking these questions. And she just told me to be on alert. Then I get a call from Anya Parampil, the wife of Max Blumenthal at Gray Zone. They're doing a piece about me. And she asked me about the Capitol. And I tell her the story. I said, I was 500 feet away. I testified. I got subpoenaed by Congress. I said, I testified under oath. I did not talk to law enforcement. She publishes this 3-part hit piece about me saying that I'm basically what Tucker said, that I'm here to make America first look bad, that I'm a Fed, that I made Joe Kent lose. The only reason I made Joe Kent lose is because I'm a Fed trying to whatever. And so I do a big stream reviewing the hit piece and debunking basically the whole thing. Then I get a call from Bryson Gray, the MAGA rapper. Now he's a Christian rapper. He's working for a company called Influenceable, which they pay influencers to push social media campaigns. He goes, my wife just got a new campaign from Influenceable. They're paying people money to post the link to this article with the hashtag FedFuentes. And there's like a whole spreadsheet. It said, or a whole like readout. It said the campaign has fed Fuentes, post the link to this article and say these things, and you get paid. And someone posted it, this state representative in New York. I forget his name a long time ago, but he was the only one who had posted it. I put them on blast. Influenceable calls me up. Please stop talking about us. We will take it down. We promise. Everyone's trying to broker this big truce. Huh. That's how, because I was pro Tucker. I was a big fan up until that point. And I said, So clearly, because him and Blumenthal are tight, he was fishing because he knew Michelle for this story. Blumenthal's wife wrote it, and that was like a coordinated hit job in retaliation for their buddy Joe Kent, who lost. And anyway, so that's kind of where the rivalry started. And by the way, I know for a fact that at a recent dinner, Tucker, even before he talked shit about me in July, he was pushing that script to anyone who would listen, to other e-celebrities, to students, saying, yeah, Nick is this gay kid, he's trans, and he's a fed, and he's here to make us look bad. So this was in private, and he was kind of suggesting that on a show, and then he explicitly said it this summer.
And it does seem like, although you're obviously a lot bigger now than you were then, you still would have been a pretty nice scalp to be on their mantle. You know what I mean? Like, it would just be like, wouldn't they go at you for that and try to find some charge or something like that? But is it the case that there's just nothing to charge you with, or what was
there was nothing to charge me with. I mean, they looked at charging me, but I didn't trespass. I wasn't violent. And
but wouldn't that be inciting something?
But my lawyer told me I'm protected by the First Amendment for that, because it wasn't like the language was such that it wouldn't be. And also, no one else got charged with incitement. The charges were trespassing, conspiracy, all things that didn't apply to me.
Right. Okay. All right. Fair enough. Yeah, I think maybe, it's like, and I think maybe this is partially why you get that rap, which I think is unfair. It's unfair to call people feds, unless you really have fucking detailed, like, I have the evidence and I'm willing to show it. It's just like, it's an unfair accusation. I think when Ray Epps, by the way, do you think he was a fed?
I don't know, to be honest. I'm skeptical, but it's possible.
Yeah. I lean toward thinking he was. Just the way the Democrats were defending him seemed so bizarre to me. So I get, if someone attacks you feel the need to attack them back. It's kind of the game we're in. I do think, though, when you're, it leads easy to the perception when you're kind of attacking me, attacking Tucker, attacking Candace, you go, well, what purpose are you really serving here? Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying? And it's like, it seems like any voice that's critical of Israel, you know what I'm saying? Like, you're going after. And then it does make people say, like, do you get the point I'm making? It goes like, okay, so what? Number one, you're saying we got to attach all this toxic baggage to our opposition of Israel. And then number two, anytime there's a critic of Israel who's resonating, it seems like you're trying to take him down a peg. You get what I'm saying?
I do, and from the outside looking in, I get it. But I would say that with Tucker, it started before all that. It started before he was ever criticizing Israel. This was in 2023, at the beginning of 2023, before October 7th. And Tucker never said anything negative about Israel up to that point, with the exception of one thing he did about the ADL. And, same thing with Candace. I mean, I supported Candace like I supported Tucker to the hilt. I had an account called Standis Owens. I stan Candace Owens. And we were like gassing her up during the whole thing. And all I ever said about Candace is that it felt like she was kind of blowing smoke up my ass about why she wouldn't do the show with me. And I didn't like that, after she gets all this clout, she's clouded up, she then starts saying it's the Frankists. It's the Frankist. And I said, yeah, that's not true. Like, that's nonsense. And even this year, she invites me on her show, and I ask her, I said, well, is it going to be a hit piece? She goes, no, I don't set anybody up. I get all dressed up. I fly down there, look into, she extended the olive branch, I accept. And she's motherfucking me about drama from a year ago, about you, about are you racist? Are you anti-Semitic? Why aren't you married? All this kind of stuff. It wasn't a friendly interview. I don't even think it was cordial. I think it was basically, it was an attempted hit job. And, so like with you, I mean, look, we have disagreements, and here we are talking about them. And I think I said during my show, like, I like you and I respect you, but I also speak freely. And if I disagree, I say something. And, these other people got to recognize, like Tucker and Candace, they're more powerful than me. They have institutional backing. Tucker is from Fox. Candace is from Daily Wire. They never got censored from anything. Me, I never had any. They tried to throttle me in the crib. By they, I mean conservatives from the time I was 18. And I've been banned from most things for 5 years. So it just, to me, it's like a little unfair. It's like when Ben Shapiro quote tweeted me with 1,000 followers for Tucker.
Well, that's something else. I mean, but
I think it's similar. I mean, Tucker and Candace getting together and saying, oh, this guy's like a fed. It's like, yeah, well, you guys have millions and millions of followers that you accumulated serving the system that I was getting killed by for 5 years. So that's why I feel like I have a special license to attack, because it's punching up. But, I don't know what to make of Tucker and Candace. I would say, if I was being charitable, that there's immense distrust on both sides.
Yeah.
And for obvious reasons, because I'm an unknown quantity on the outside who, they probably don't watch everything. They don't know what's happening down here. And on the other side, they are exiting the institutions. So from someone on the outside, it's like, are you CIA? Where are your loyalties? What do you really believe? Are you concealing what you really believe? And to what extent? And so, I guess when I gave Tucker a black eye, so to speak, and kind of retaliated very strongly, maybe at the minimum, it made him just kind of respect what I represent. But I'm open to all possibilities, making up with either of them.
Well, that's good. I think it's good to be open to that. You went at Tucker pretty hard, I remember, after the 2020 election.
Yeah.
When he was basically saying, I have not seen any evidence that this thing was stolen. And to be fair, you went at him in a pretty harsh way. And so I'm just saying, things like that, I think guys like me and you often feel like, well, who the fuck am I? I'm just some guy talking shit, whereas people see more than you think, and they are aware of it.
Yeah.
Just saying.
Well, and I get that, but with Tucker in particular, the Fed, if he came out and said, I don't like that kid, that's different than saying he's a Fed.
Agreed.
And he said, I know that. And it's like, but I'm me, and I know that's not true. How can you know something that's not true? And people don't have to believe me, but I know what I know, and Tucker knows what he knows. And
I've been accused of being a Fed by several people, that I'm here to ruin libertarianism and here to do all this. It's an amusement. And of course, I've been accused of being on Qatar's payroll, which is like, when do they start sending the money? I have no idea.
Yeah.
I'm doing everything. Come on, guys.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
There's no more debate about this, Douglas Murray. It's like, yeah, I'm as big as you without the institutional background. So you don't get to say I don't get to be here. And I think the same thing is true with you and the Groypers. It's like, nobody's being vanquished. We're all here. And in fact, what needs to happen is not vanquishing people, but incorporating. And I think that Tucker and Candace and people like that, I just think all these voices are so important. And you know what I mean? I hope you would kind of think about that.
And I do. And I grant that on my show even throughout these feuds, I've said they're both important and they're pushing people in the right direction. But I think it's totally the opposite. I think that, with Candace in particular, she brought me out under false pretenses and then tried to vanquish me. I think that's what that was, or that was a way of putting me down or something, because I had just had my biggest show ever in the middle of the war. She invites me out the next day, and her whole show is, you hate Jews for being Jewish. You're a real racist. And it wasn't friendly. It was nasty. She was nasty to me. And then afterwards, she wouldn't let it go. It didn't play well at all, because in the interview, she goes, well, you got triggered. I said, I don't think so. She goes, well, people are going to, and nobody agreed. People were furious about the paywall. They're pissed at the way she treated me. It was universally negative, and she wouldn't let it go. And then she got to come in and say, well, you lied. The reason people didn't like it is because you lied about it. And it's like, lady, you got to take the L. You were out of pocket. It didn't work. It backfired. So I could coexist with her. I was willing to do it before. I'd even be willing to do it now. And the same is true with Tucker. And I think Tucker's more rational. Maybe he's a guy or something, or I don't know why.
It does help.
It helps, But I could coexist with Tucker. It's just there needs to be a mutual understanding, because I also represent a lot of people, and when they put me down, they're not just putting me down, they're putting down that whole right-wing flank of the issue. And I don't need everybody to agree with me. We can I love the disagreement. Sure. I love this conversation. And we disagreed about some things here too. It's just when people say, you're a Fed, you're a racist, F you shouldn't be allowed on the shows, you're just an asshole. It's like, I'm not an asshole. I've been fighting for 10 years to say the stuff that many of these people just got around to saying last year. And that's just, So yeah, it's like a little irritating when they do that to me, but I'm willing to be the bigger person.
Well, it's good. Well, look, I mean, I think it's good. Look, dude, I mean, but with the general kind of like hostility toward Jewish people, this does seem to be something that's like really catching fire, and I just think is completely wrong. Like, I think it's like Israel killed Charlie Kirk. It's like, this just isn't actually right. It's not actually good history. And so anyway, I'm just curious what your thoughts are. Well, and I also, by the way, sorry, I'll let you go, but I also do recognize, I remember thinking this the last time I had you on, there's like this weird dynamic. I guess I feel a little freer now. But back then, I kind of wanted to ask you about it. But then I also realized that if you don't, you can't even say it because we'll all get fucking nuked. So it's like a weird conversation to have. But I am curious.
For me, it was never really about the Holocaust in itself, because early on, I watched a lot of documentaries, like the canon of Holocaust denial documentaries and essays, and I found a lot of the arguments compelling. And then I saw that other people were pushing back on that. And I have good friends of mine who are like, they're fellow travelers, let's say, and they adamantly insist it did happen. And they send me blog posts and things. Yeah. And at a certain point, you sit down and say, so is this really about World War II historicity debate or historiographical debate? And to me, it's sort of missing the point. To me, the Holocaust is just like, it is just a central part of the Jewish identity story, which is that if the white people get too much power, they're going to kill us all. And that means if we don't have enough power, they're going to kill us all. If they can critique us, they're going to kill us all. It's wrapped up, and this has been pointed out before, that more Jewish people think that the Holocaust is central to their identity than believe that believing in God is central to their identity. And that just tells you about what Jewish identity really is and how it's political. And so to me, what matters more, I don't know. I think it was exaggerated. I think it was embellished. I don't know that 6 million exactly died, but I don't know. I'm not an expert, and I don't really even care about being an expert. To me, it's more about, like you said, I don't want this trauma imposed on me and for it to define our political order, because that's really the issue.
Well, that part I think is 100% reasonable. Like, I really appreciated on Patrick Bet David when you said like, that you're like, I'm not a racialist, I'm a Christian. And that it's like, and that not that you might have some racialist views, but like that being a Christian is first and foremost like the most important part of your identity. I would just really encourage that. I think like that's what we need. I really think that's like, I told you when we spoke on the phone when we first planned this, and I told you the video that I saw of you was like a clip that was going super viral, which I think were touching on earlier today, where you were just like, where you were talking about how like a Christian just can't support killing people like this. And you were, and you even said, you were like, look, I don't want them living here, but like that we also can't support killing them over there. And I just thought there was something really powerful about that. It's like kind of, because it's a paradigm shattering thing where someone would look at this and go like, wait, but I've been led to believe this is like the most horrible person, and he's the one who cares about this. And I kind of think, like, I would just hope that that's in, you know what I mean? Like that you continue kind of to push that and all that stuff. I will say, I really, really appreciate you coming out and traveling for this. I know it took us, it's hard. We're both busy, and so it's hard to schedule these things. Really, really enjoyed this conversation. I hope we do it again soon.
Me too. Absolutely. And thanks for having me. And I will say, just to kind of close it off, what I love honesty. I like people that care about the country. I love people. And I think as long as that's the agreement, there won't be war. There won't be violence, and we can talk and we can get along. And that's really what it's about. So I enjoyed the conversation as well. So I'd be happy to do it again.
All right.
Maybe on my show.
Oh, sure thing. All right. Everybody, thank you for listening. Catch you next time.